Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 historical fiction books and why I think you should read them. So grab your tea, coffee, whatever you fancy, and let's get into it. Just a side note, I did not sleep well last night, so please bear with me in this video. Hopefully I'll get through it and still make some sort of sense. But yes, I thought since I love reading historical fiction, I would share with you 5 historical fiction books from different eras, and we'll just talk about why I like them and why I think they are worth a read. So we're going to be going from the 1930s to the 1970s in this video. So starting off in the 1930s, the historical fiction book that I think you should read set in this time period is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I think this is a classic for a reason. If you don't know, if you've never read it, if you've never seen the film adaptations, To Kill a Mockingbird is about a man, a lawyer called Atticus Finch. He is defending a black man in the state of Alabama. It is set during the Great Depression, and this man has been accused of raping a white woman. And so Atticus Finch is his defence lawyer. So this is like a really controversial case. The community is really segregated. The main theme in the book is racism and racial injustice. And I wish, I really wish this book still wasn't eerily relevant today. But unfortunately, it still is in a lot of ways. I read this book in high school because we had to, but it never felt like a chore. Like, I loved reading this book and I have reread it since. I really like the black and white film adaptation of it. I just think this is a really powerful, important book. Yeah, and it's not even that long. It's only 309 pages, so it's not even that big a book. Okay, next up we're moving into the 1940s, and the book that I think you should read set in this era is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. So this is set, well, actually, this isn't a linear structure of this book, so it does jump back and forth in time, but it is set mainly in 1940s, where a man and his daughter, who is blind, have to flee France because it has been occupied by the Nazis. What I really loved about this book is because Marie is blind and she is like the central character in this book is filled with sensory description and doesn't rely on like visual description, which is really interesting and quite unlike anything I've ever read. So I really, really enjoyed this book. There's also a really good adaptation of it starring Mark Ruffalo, who plays Marie's dad. The perfect casting for that character. I really liked the adaptation. I think it was a series on Netflix, I want to say. Really, really good. Definitely worth watching. I will say this book will make you cry. Like, it is not for the weak. But a really, really good, interesting read from, well, set in the 1940s. Okay, next up we're moving to the 1950s/60s, and the book I have to recommend to you is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. So yeah, this is maybe a bit of a treat because it is a book about time travel, so it does span quite a vast amount of time, but I'm counting it as 1950s because our main character Jake in this story sort of discovers this time portal and he goes back to 1958. But the main crux of this book is Jake sets out on this quest to stop Lee Harvey Oswald from assassinating JFK. This is one of the few books that deserves the extremely hefty page count. This is over 700 pages long. I don't typically like a book that long. I honestly like my books around about the 300 to 400 page mark. So this is quite a big leap up for me, but it justifies it. I was not once bored. You really feel like you live with these characters. Like, these characters became so real to me. You're actively rooting for them. Like, at one point I genuinely thought if he manages to stop Lee Harvey Oswald, JFK wouldn't be assassinated in my reality. Like, I actually, when you're reading a book and you're so in it that you forget that it's a book and you're like, oh yeah, this is just a work of fiction, it's just a book. That genuinely happened to me. Like by the end of it, I was like, oh my goodness, is he going to stop this? And then like JFK will just be alive, or will have been alive, and will have just died of natural causes later on in my reality. I don't know how a book like Stephen King honestly can work some magic, in my opinion, to make you do that. And I just think this is a really, really good book, and quite a rare book for Stephen King in the sense that it isn't horror related. It is purely science fiction, historical fiction. So yeah, I think Stephen King should do more of this because it's really, really good. Next up, we're moving into the 1960s, and the book that I want to recommend to you is The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cook. So this is set in 1965, and it follows our main character Peril, who becomes I always think it's funny when I have to say peril in a because I have a Scottish accent. Because I feel like the rest of the world says peril. We say peril. Anyway, so she becomes pregnant out of wedlock and she is shipped off to Leichenhall, which is a mother and baby home. Now, I didn't know this before reading this book, but these were real places in which unwed mothers would go to have their babies in secrecy away from their community. The babies would then be adopted to wealthier families that couldn't have children for whatever reason, and the mothers would rejoin society and probably just be expected to go back to their normal lives as if nothing traumatizing had ever happened. So yeah, I really love this book, and it is also science fiction, but I think the historical aspect of it is so strong because it is rooted in such an interesting and yet I feel like really glossed over part of history. Like, I am Scottish, these homes existed in the not too distant past, and I had never heard of them until I read this book. I think that's really interesting, so definitely recommend reading The Ghost Woods. Last but not least, we are jumping to the 1970s, and I have a super cheery book recommendation for this one, and that is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. So this is, as the title suggests, about 5 sisters who take their own lives, and it's sort of a look at like the circumstances surrounding that and why they might have done that. And it feels weird to say I like this book because it's so sad and bleak, but I do think it's worth reading. One thing that I struggled with in this book is that we don't hear directly from the girls. The girls, another word that's really fun if you have a Scottish accent, girls. We don't hear directly from the sisters. It is all from like second-hand accounts from like people that knew them, like boys that knew them growing up or whatever, neighbours, and things like that. And I kind of thought that was a shame. I wish that the sisters had been given a voice and we heard from them. I don't know. I go back and forth about this because I think the whole point was to highlight the perceptions of people sort of witnessing this from afar, these tragedies from afar, witnessing this family breakdown. I always think it was really interesting because I feel like one of the main problems that the sisters had was their parents, in particular their mother, who was very strict and very controlling, and seemed like she was really against sort of their sexual exploration, sexual liberation. A lot of the sisters were getting to that age where they were having their first crush, hitting puberty, and the mother was like sort of really trying to control them, keep them in the house, and just created this really toxic environment. So yeah, it's not a happy book, but it is interesting, and I do think it's really worth a read. Gosh, this video's made me realise I read a lot of dark stuff. I need to lighten up. I think that's why I read a lot of Greek mythology, like it's sprinkled in, because like I can just go off and like be in Olympus for a little bit. Because yeah, when I actually get down to like historical fiction, it goes dark. It just goes dark. But I think historical fiction is really important. I think we can learn a lot from history. History quite often repeats itself, and quite often, as we see in books like To Kill a Mockingbird, are still relevant today. There's still, unfortunately, issues of racism. There's still prejudice in many communities about unwed mothers. There's still prejudice about sexual freedom. Women in general, you know, especially women that are coming of age, hitting, you know, young girls hitting puberty. It's still like this terrifying time. It's like this idea that we should be able to control women, and I think that's what some of these books really highlight. You know, there is this idea that we should be able to control women, and an unruly, uncontrollable women is a real problem. And I think particularly in those last two books, it really highlights that. Went off a bit of a tangent, but I just love historical fiction. I think there's such important books to read, and I would highly recommend that you pick more historical fiction up. So with that being said, if you do have any more historical fiction books to recommend to me, please let me know. I do want to explore more from like the 70s, 80s. I feel like when I read historical fiction, I go quite far back. Like I go to like 30s, 40s, 50s. I don't have as much for like 60s, 70s, 80s. And I'm refusing to classify 90s as historical fiction as someone that was born in 1992. No, that'll be historical fiction in the year 3000, okay? Not now. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think of them, leave me a comment, or if you haven't read them but are interested in reading them after hearing me talk about them, let me know. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you fancy. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!